Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast. Today's show tackles a hot button topic, housing affordability in Australia. Look, with skyrocketing prices and rents and a shortage of available homes, many are pointing the finger at immigration. What if we stopped immigration, they're asking? Would it be the panacea to a housing crisis? Is stopping immigration really the answer? Well, joining me to explore this complex topic is Ken Race, Director of Metropole Wealth Advisory, and I hope by the end of today's show you'll have some clarity on the benefits and the challenges immigration is causing and what Australia is going to look like over the next decade. So, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Australia is a land sculpted by the hands of its people. People from every corner of the globe. Our vibrant cities, our bustling suburbs are a testament to a history of open doors, open hearts and immigration. Yet, as we stand amongst the most significant housing crisis in I think ever in Australia, definitely in my memory of being around for property for 50 years, with skyrocketing rents, a dire shortage of homes, it's time to ask some tough questions. Is immigration helping us or harming us? So to dissect this complex issue, I'm joined by Ken Race, Director of Metropole Wealth Advisory, who brings decades of insights into property, tax and wealth. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Michael. Hi, listeners.
Well, Ken, last year our shores saw an unprecedented surge of new residents, with net overseas migration hitting record highs. Now, this influx brought both challenges but opportunities as well. It stimulated our economy, and if we're thinking much more broadly, it has enriched our cultural landscape, but it's also tightened the screws on an already overheated housing market. Now, the government claims it's going to repair the broken migration system, and it's going to pare back the number of immigrants coming to more sustainable levels. But is that going to work, and what's going to be the cost? And what would Australia look like if those numbers not only stabilised but were stopped altogether, as some are suggesting? So, Ken, let's just start with what's actually happening at the moment. So what sort of numbers have been happening and what's led to this housing shortage?
I think housing shortage is a factor of, three or four things. The main ones being, a growing population that's far exceeding forecasts. 2/3 of that is driven by migration. We saw a big catch-up of the students. So post-COVID, we've got that flood.
You're talking about the flood of students, not the floods
the flood of students. Yes.
Not the floods we're also experiencing by the weather.
The flood of students into universities. I think the over-reliance on, can I say, what is deemed to be single dwellings, not in my backyard syndrome. So therefore, we're not seeing multi-dwellings being built. I'm not talking about the 30, 40, 50 stories. But when you build a 3-level apartment block, why can't it be 4 levels? All of a sudden, you've got 25% more houses. The other thing is, I think, infrastructure. Infrastructure hasn't kept up with the pace of population growth. So people now can't afford to live in the more outer suburbs because of the time it takes to get to their place of work. So, the government is trying to catch up a little bit with roads. And I think one of the big things is skilled labour in those areas. We're currently seeing about 50% of people between 15 and 25 are university students or graduates. I mean, that number's grown from 30% about 15 years ago, and in the 70s it was under 10%. So it's not attractive anymore to go to TAFE and get a trade. So there is a shortage of people to actually build these properties. And that's pushing up prices as well as slowing the time.
Well, if we put it into perspective, and the numbers only recently came out from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and that goes back to September last year. And if you look at the population clock, we've already hit over 27 million people now. But variously, the figures are suggesting something like 500,000 immigrants to Australia in the year beforehand, net overseas migration. And we know that's a portion of them are people who are students coming back to Australia, and there's also the permanent residents and some people on special visas. But there's also been some estimates of what's likely to happen if we continue at, okay, not these sort of very high population growths, but the population growth that's happened over the past. And it's suggested that, well, the Centre of Population Australia has suggested we'd end up with something like growing by about 370 people a year for the next decade, which means we'd grow our population by 14%. Putting it in perspective, we'll probably have 3.7 million more people. That's roughly 3 extra Adelaides to shelter, educate, care for, entertain, as our population will reach somewhere around 31 million people by 2034.
As you were saying, it's 3 Adelaides, but it's 60% of a Sydney.
Yes.
Of a Melbourne. Like, when you put it in that context, is you can't shoehorn those people into the existing, if you like, geography that we have for building houses. But to me, population growth is productivity in a sense, because these people consume things, so therefore they add money into the circulating economy. They also, a lot of these migrants are taking some of, can I say, the less desirable jobs, moving into childcare, into aged care. So we need those people. And with an ageing population, we actually need productivity to generate the tax to pay the social welfare bill of the ageing population, because they're not paying taxes anymore.
Well, I guess the government's designed its migration program to address the emerging skills shortage and to attract people with specific skills that are difficult to find or develop in Australia. As you said, we're not getting as many apprentices anymore or going through the TAFE system. More of us are going to university, and that's good. We're having a bigger knowledge-based society where wages are going to be higher, but other people still have to do those jobs. Our joint good friend Simon Kirstenmacher recently on one of our podcasts suggested that one of the jobs that he's worried about in the future is truck drivers. I mean, if you drive down the street, you'll see trucks everywhere delivering things to the local shops, interstate. We're importing a lot more things. And his suggestion was most truck drivers are in their 50s. When they retire, young people don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to be a truck driver, do they, Ken?
That's right. And without doing a free advert for Tesla, with the automated vehicles, they're not going to be able to, do the short runs, the milk runs where you've got to drop off to a number of stores, the human interaction. So that is a significant thing. And can I say they're well-paid jobs in the scheme of things, yet, they're seen as a more demeaning type job, which I think started back, can I say, when they changed the welfare system, where parents were paid, they stopped getting assistance when children were age 16. They pushed it up to 19. So that kept people in the school system, in the high schools, and then they were pushed into university. So they actually made it unattractive for people to go into trades. And we've now got to turn this huge monolith ship, and that just doesn't happen overnight. And as you said, the short-term fix is migration, but it's certainly not the long-term.
That makes sense, and I agree with you that we should be encouraging more people to take up trades, whether it's hospitality or chefs or plumbers, electricians. TAFE definitely should be churning out more Australians doing things. Now, we're also bringing a lot of people into our universities here, and people are saying, well, do we really need all those overseas students, I think there's a couple of reasons why they help us. Sure, they have created in the short term a housing crisis in the inner city and apartments around the universities. But in fact, that's not where the average Australian wants to rent anyway. So I don't think they're harming the average first person moving out of home into those sort of apartments. But our universities, our colleges have benefited financially from the student boom, and so have the shops around them. Remember only a couple of years ago, Ken, almost every shop had a sign up the front saying barista wanted, servers wanted. We don't see that anymore. The students are bringing money into the system. If they weren't paying for their education here, the education that the Australians are getting would be costing more. Either we as parents or students would have to pay more, or the government would have to subsidise it. So overseas students are making local education cheaper.
Correct. So I think as Australia's lost its manufacturing base, that's been supplemented, I think, by a couple of different industries: the education industry, the health industry, the tourism industry. We're a clean, safe country. Selling something, because it's akin to an export, education, where overseas students come, they pay for their courses. Yes, they don't have to get the same HEC scores and things like that to get in, and they pay. So the university sector has flourished, if you like, because of that, the same as the medical profession, tourism. I think we need that. We just need a place to house them. And they typically don't live in a 4-bedroom house unless there's 10 of them. But we need different type of accommodation as well.
Well, when you look at the demographics of the people coming in, we're importing many early career professionals aged 25 to 34. About half of these are going to be in the knowledge jobs. Sure, there's others in the skills jobs, as you were talking about. And these knowledge jobs are in general located around our CBDs of our big cities. And the majority of these people are going to be renting for the first years of their residency here. I think that also means that if you look forward in 3, 4, 5 years' time, they're going to be coupling up. They're going to have dual income households. They're initially without children, then with children, but they're going to have a bit of spare cash. So I guess this going to be pushing up house prices moving forward as these tenants for the next few years eventually want to buy their own homes. I think many of them are going to want to live in apartments, though. They're used to that from the lifestyle overseas. And it's also a great way to live when you're just starting out in life.
And I think another point of view is that mindset of that overseas person is different. Their first home is not their forever home. They don't buy the McMansion 4 bedrooms and then hope to fill it. They're quite happy to start off with an apartment, even up to having their first child, and then looking for a detached house. So that whole mindset travels all the way through.
Well, okay, so our country has been built on migration, and I can't see that changing. But I think it actually does make an interesting intellectual exercise to see, okay, what would occur if we reduced immigration levels or stopped it altogether? So we were suggesting that over the next little while, with the normal migration levels, over the next decade, our population would grow to 31, 32 million people. If nobody else came in and we were starting to die off a little bit more than we're creating babies, maybe we'd stay around 27 million people in a decade's time. Would this decline of maybe 4 million people that would have come in or grown otherwise actually reduce our requirement for housing? Yes. But I also think it's a double-edged sword. Fewer consumers mean, I think, less entrepreneurial spirit. We're going to be an aging population rather than a younger population if we bring in these migrants. And I think there's also going to be a decline in cultural diversity, innovation. I think our current demographics of younger people coming in has got a lot of good features to it, Ken.
Yeah, I'm not a proponent of this term, the Ponzi scheme, that, we're just bringing in people. We actually need them in a small populated, large country. If you want to build a road, that's going to have 10,000 people driving across it, it'll never get done. But if all of a sudden there's 100,000, it starts to pay for itself. And then that increases productivity. The truck drivers will now be able to deliver the food on a decent road. we need the taxes from these people to fund the ageing population. I think to fund some of the social benefit schemes that the governments are trying to do. We're obviously now spending a lot more money on, can I say, the armed services, the submarine fleet, the amphibious fleet, the different technologies the Defence Force is bringing into the country. That requires money. So you either get migration who'll take on a job and pay tax, or you have to reduce other social benefits. And I think most people at the end of the day would stay away from higher taxes.
That makes sense. So having a bigger population will allow the government to spend on these things. I don't know how small countries like New Zealand, and we've got lots of clients from New Zealand and lovely people there, can afford an army, an air force, a navy, and all the social infrastructure with such a small population. And relatively, as you say, even Australia's population is small compared to lots of other countries, so it makes it difficult. I think a no immigration future also has some severe potential consequences. I think the elderly care crisis is an issue. It's been a little while since I've been in a nursing home to visit people, but I think we're relying a lot on migrant workers in the elderly sector. When I was there last time, the lovely people helping, most of them were immigrants.
Correct. And our whole idea of aged care, I think, is changing as well. I mean, I know until recently I used to think it's these 80, 85-year-old people who need all the assistance in the world. But now it's, people who are retiring, at 65, 67, whatever it is, moving into those new communities where they actually don't need day-to-day medical assistance and care, but they're not taxpayers. They've got some sort of self-funded retirement income. But we're actually seeing a lot of people moving out of the workforce into retirement who haven't spent the time, the money, the education, whatever it is, to build up that pot of gold that will actually see them into retirement and beyond.
Well, of course, superannuation wasn't compulsory when you and I started work, was it?
Correct. And even the balances of today really aren't that high. And over the next 10, 15 years, 20 years maybe, when this next group of people reach age 67, the average superannuation balance is going to be well under $500,000. It's probably going to be around the 300,000 mark. And, different studies have shown that, a basic income needed to live is 50,000, but that's still quite basic. So that superannuation balance, won't deliver that sort of income. It'll have some supplement from Centrelink, but not much. And you'll need to eat into that capital, which means if you live to 95, you'll actually run out of money. So I think that's an area that we've also got to put a lot of time and focus on. It's how people will actually be able to create a sustainable, if you like, financial security into retirement.
Well, I think it's one of the clever things our governments of the past have done, making sure that Australians are preparing for their retirement, at least partially, because that's not the case overseas. And with this huge wave of baby boomers retiring over the next decade, the system just would not have coped, Ken, if we weren't at least partially, if not fully, funding our retirement. So there's the aged care crisis, there's the healthcare system crisis, because as you get older, you require more health services to keep having a good standard of life. I guess what I'm looking at are the factors that would suffer if we didn't have the immigration. We talk about construction not keeping up with demand. We're just not building enough accommodation. But if migrants have been the linchpin of the industry of construction, I mean, you go way back to even the Snowy Mountains was all built with migrants, wasn't it? And today when you go on a lot of building sites, there's lots of Aussies there, but there's lots of migrants helping as well. So I think not keeping up immigration would affect our residential housing markets, and it would shrink the labour pool. It would have fewer people, which I guess would push up wages, which probably wouldn't be a very good idea either.
Correct. And a lot of these migrants are coming from very densely populated areas. And that's one of the attractions of coming to Australia, the big open area, the quarter acre, a block, even a big apartment. So we need to rethink the types of housing, and we've seen an increase in villas, townhouses as well. So that's that middle ground for either people to move into as their first or second home, and also for people as a stepping stone into retirement. The thing is going to be, how easy is it going to be to build those 2 or 3 townhouses on a block of land that had one dwelling on it? Will the councils actually play ball? And we've certainly seen that in a lot of instances that hasn't occurred. And that's going to keep supply of housing down and therefore continue to push up prices.
Well, there's a number of reasons why it's not occurring, and the federal government's now pushing the issues down to state governments, which is now encouraging local councils to change their planning regulations. I'm not sure we really need 3 levels of government in Australia, but that's what we're stuck with at the moment. And local councils, in general, are against medium density development in most of their municipalities. They encourage them around the train stations, around the shopping centres, but not deeper into the suburbs so as not to annoy the people who vote them into council. So if we actually look at the consequences of not increasing or not having migration, slowing it down or stopping it altogether, we're going to have various shifts in the labour market and also in our economy. Our economy needs people buying, spending. When people come to the country, they have to buy a fridge and a television or a couple of televisions and mobile phones and all sorts of other things. Yes, people are saying it's a Ponzi scheme and we've got a per capita recession, but there's no doubt that having more people here is encouraging our economy to keep growing and keeping small businesses alive, Ken.
Absolutely correct. And, just as an example, the refrigerator or the TV may be imported into this country, but it's a local shop that sells it. It's a local repairman that repairs it. So it supports a lot of local industry. Housing is one of the easy levers to either increase the activity level in the economy or decrease it. And we've seen governments play that lever for certainly the last 30 years. We're really now at the pointy end where we say there's short-term pain with migration, yes, on housing, but what's the long-term benefit? And the long-term benefit, as you said, it's taxes to pay for all the things we want. It's the different skill sets. It's the culture. It's all those things we've just been talking about, which are very positive required things when we talk about the 2050s, the 2060s. And if you don't do it now, what are we going to do then?
Too hard to catch up, isn't it, Ken? Of course, there's an election coming up in around 12 months' time, so I'm sure this issue is not going to go away, and the government has talked about doing things about it. Whether they're actually going to do something or whether they can is another matter. Low population growth, sure, it'll ease our housing shortage, but as we say, it's going to come with its own set of challenges, reduced economic activity, maybe an impact on how we live in the cities we live in. Smaller cities and towns may face stagnation, and I think, has the immigration affected our social fabric, our culture, the different foods, the different ways we entertain ourselves. So I guess it's going to need a balanced approach. Not sure how well our government's going to cope with that, just like all the other policies. Maybe they should get the housing minister to sit together with the immigration minister and be on the same page.
I think that's right. I think for all those reasons. So I think the short-term pain of the migration levels we're seeing now, we've really got to learn to push through that and put in place policies to minimise that pain. But the benefit is going to be in the long run. And, the scary thing is not only do we have an aging population because of lower birth rates, things like that, but if you like, the advances in medicine, in healthcare, actually allows us to live longer. So it's not going to be too far into the future where being 100 isn't necessarily going to be such a significant milestone. There'll be so many of us. And notice I said us in that. Whereas before it was quite unusual. And then you got the letter from the Queen and now the King. But, what they're
We're
saying
probably
is
going to outlive him, Ken. That's a shame. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that, but the editor's not going to cut it out.
Look, they're basically saying if you're reasonably healthy at 60, you're going to be living into the mid-90s. And that's 35 years away. So, when people retire, if they've got the next 30 years that they've got to spend their time on, that's another issue that's going to come up. What are the 65 and the 70-year-olds, the healthy people, going to do? And can they come back into the workforce with less tax penalties to actually shore up some of the short-term issues with labour?
A lot of people know Metropole as property advisors. They think we're buyer's agents. We're much, much more than buyer's agents. We help our clients grow, protect and pass on their wealth safely to future generations. But you're Director of Metropole Wealth Advisory, which actually fits in with exactly what you said a moment ago, because a lot of our clients need advice and structuring during their business life and during their investment growth stage. But more and more of our clients, Ken, are looking to get to the next stage of their life where they're now wanting to ensure that they've got the right structures, the right setup to not only enjoy their life but pass on their wealth to future generations. I know it's something that takes quite a bit of your team's time up at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of look at it as the great divide, if you like, and not so much the haves and the have-nots. It's the people who have spent time on themselves, educated themselves, taken a bit of risk, invested, grow a property portfolio. So you get to a stage where you could be a bit asset rich, but income poor. So there's this chasm, if you like, in between the conversion of all that into a passive income stream. And I don't like to call it, the pathway to retirement, but if we think of it, how do we actually grow our passive income to a point where we can actually have choice at different points in time to enjoy ourselves, to help other family members? So we're spending a lot more time with our clients now on creating that plan for that pathway.
Well, again, it doesn't necessarily mean to buy another property. So people sometimes think, if I go to Metropole, they're just going to talk me into buying another property. No, we don't. We don't even sell property. But if you're interested in securing your financial future, if you're wanting to make sure that you're set up right for the pathway to the next stage of your life, I'll leave a link in the show notes. So go to metropole.com.au and look at our wealth advisory tab and see what Ken and his team can do for you. But you also help people at the earlier stage of their journey as well by choosing the right structures, Ken.
Correct. People really underestimate the damage the wrong decision that you make really early on in your life. So you've got to buy the right, I'll call it an investment property, not just any property. You've got to have it correctly structured so that you can actually benefit through time. You've then got to make sure that you've put safety nets in place to minimize risk in case, you get hit by the proverbial bus or you lose your job or you lose your income. How do you safeguard those assets? It takes, if you like, input from a lot of different professional areas to create this plan. And certainly here at Metropole Wealth, we actually tap into the financial planning, the property side of things, the holistic view of the world, so that you get a complete picture that all fits together to create a nice, if you like, jigsaw puzzle image.
Well, I know you've written a great ebook, Your Guide to Understanding Ownership Structures and Trusts. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes to that so people can get that for themselves and understand what you do. And if you're interested in getting Ken and his team, and Ken, even though you've stepped back and got to manage a large team you manage, you're still seeing clients. So if you want to have Ken on your side, go to metropole.com.au, leave us your details, and Ken and the team would love to have a chat with you. Thanks, Ken. Look forward to our next chat real soon.
Thank you, Michael.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In my mindset message today, I want to talk to you about a question that will help you align your intentions with your actions. Let me ask you, if somebody observed your actions for a week, what would they say your priorities are? There are often two sets of priorities in our lives. First of all, the priority we think we have, and number two, the priorities our actions show you have. Look, we've all been there. We've got a set of priorities that we firmly believe in, but I know the vagaries of life enter in and our actions begin to stray from those priorities. Look, in my life, one of my priorities is to lose weight and not eat as much chocolate. But to be honest, if people watched me from the outside, they'd see why I am heavier than I should be. So I want to ask you a question that would help you decide, are you living in congruity with your priorities? If somebody observed your actions for a week, what would they say your priorities are? If an unbiased third party looked at you, what would they think? What would your actions reveal? Would they be in alignment or dislocation with what you're really wanting to achieve? What areas and priorities do you seem to be cutting corners on? Living life as your main character means we have a difficult time holding ourselves to the fire. So the question that you're asking, what would others see, gives you a zoomed out view that provides a healthy touch of perspective. The ultimate goal is alignment of your intentions and your actions, and you can achieve that. So asking yourself this question will help you. So for the next week or so, be an unbiased observer. What do your actions say about your priorities? And then what changes do you need to make to live life aligned to your intentions? Well, thanks for spending the last little while with me, and I hope you got some benefit from this show. If you did, and you know somebody else who'd also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcasts, there's 3 little buttons down the bottom. Press it and share it, or just tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you'll definitely be doing me a favour and helping me in my quest to make as many people as possible financially literate. Now, there's ways of catching up with me between these shows. Just look for Michael Yardney on social media, or why not join my private Facebook group? Go to Facebook and look for the Property Update Facebook group. And I have a way of saying thank you to you for subscribing to this podcast. Go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where you can get a bunch of ebooks and reports. My way of saying thank you. And when you've got time, why not listen to some of the old podcasts? There's individual lessons in each of those that I think would be helpful for you. I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?